Shalom, everyone. How are you? Hope you're all well. Hi. Um, we are today in the update. The truth is, I wanted to have a guest speaker, and I think they only can be joining us next time. An expert about American politics, and surely he would have a lot to say this time. But I think that there's two main elements to talk about when you're talking about updates right now. I'm not going to give you the news. The news is like it's always there. You can pop on your channel and learn the news, and I'm sure most of you know the news better than I. You probably heard just a couple of hours ago there's a car of an organization, the International Kitchen that was targeted in Gaza. What a mistake. They targeted civilians, volunteers from the world, a mistake during the war, and civilians died that came to help in Gaza. It's sad. It's going to be on the news for a couple of days, and I'm not going to talk about it. And I'm not going to talk about the lower surface news. It's important, but you know that. What I try to do in the updates is try to bring you the extra layer of deepen the understanding of what happens in Israel and maybe give you the approach of what we see in Israel, what occupies us, right? What do we hear and what are the debates about in Israel? And also maybe try to shine some lights on information that you receive and you know, maybe connect the dots. And the most important thing is hopefully finish and give time for questions. I think that's where the sweet spot is. Allow you to ask questions and maybe to try as much as I can to clarify things you see on the news. Okay? Thumbs up if you're with me. Awesome. So there's two main issues that I'm going to talk about right now, and I'm going to dive into the deepest water possible. I'm going to talk about and the inner circle of what happens in Israel and the international circle of what happens during the war. And of course, I'm going to talk about the latest, which is the story with the ultra-Orthodox drafting in Israel. If you heard about the topic, it's all over the news. And it's a big story. And of course, with that, I will go to something that happened a couple of a week and a half ago, was it? That the US did not veto a resolution about ending the war in Gaza, calling for a ceasefire. This attached from the fact we need to release our hostages. You heard of it, right? So these are the two topics, inner and out. And let's talk about the inner circles. Maybe later on, we'll move to the next topic. So I want to go into the very basic history of where we start. And the story starts, where does it start? 300 years ago in Europe. A bit of Jewish history, okay? So, Jewish people are scattered around the world, and you have people that live in small communities, later on they're going to be called ghettos, but ghetto in the beginning wasn't a bad word. It was just a Jewish neighborhood. By definition, Jewish people have a tendency to live among themselves for several reasons, especially religious reasons, when the main one is we need to able to have a lot of facilities for the Jewish community. We're talking about the school, we're talking about the synagogue, we're talking about kosher food, and it makes it easier when there are a lot of people coming together to facilitate all that. So I'm a teacher, you're a butcher, she's a kindergarten teacher, and he's a rabbi. Let's all scoop into an area, we live together, and we do what we do, and we're able to live life. So you saw Fiddler on the Roof. If you didn't, just when I'm finished, just go and watch Fiddler on the Roof. That's the classic movie that really describes the shtetl, the Jewish neighbor, that people sat and lived their life and everybody had their position, just like the movie says. Tradition, tradition. And life was centered around the fact that the one thing that differentiated Jewish people and their neighbors was, just a second, my son here makes me crazy. I'm going to shout at him and I'm going to sign in that before. I wasn't screaming because of you. It's good that you were here. So the one thing that defined the Jewish community, the Jewish family, is that we were always about education. And it's fascinating story, and I really recommend go and read this topic because these are huge topics to discuss. You know, when we talk about Jewish history, you will notice that there's a pattern. From the beginning, the scope of the feeling is that a father needs to educate his kids to read, to learn. So in a community that were based on agriculture work, the surrounding area, the Jewish families knew how to read and how to write. Why? Because how can you be a religious person without, reading the scrolls of the Torah, without praying from the Siddur? From a very early age, you had this notion that you need to learn to read and to write, right? Where does it find you? In the bar mitzvah. When you're 13 years old, you need to stand on the stage in front of everybody and read your scroll. It's unheard of. I'm not talking about now that it makes sense, everybody reads and writes. In a society where people did not know how to read, how to write, of course, the Jewish community was always facing this demand: you need to learn. You cannot be a Jew without it. And of course, bear in mind, we're talking about an area before the Enlightenment. A situation was a Jewish person meant an observant Jew. The fact that you know many Jewish today that are not observant, that's a new thing. It happened 200, 250 years ago. That's it. The vast majority of the people were learned people and were religious people. And why is it important? Because in this village, right, in this shtetl, in this town, there was always the person that counted the most. Who was this person? Who was the peer person that everybody looked, was the role model, was the goal of everybody? If you're thinking that it's going to be the macher of town or the rich person of town, you're mistaken. The goal was always the rabbi. The rabbi was the goal. Okay, you looked at your kid and you prayed that one day your son is going to be the rabbi. You looked at your daughter and you said, hopefully one day my daughter would marry the rabbi's son. Why is that? Because of course, in a society that looks at education in learning a pinnacle point, that's the goal. And a rabbi is probably the person that is most educated, learned the most, spend his life learning Torah, of course, Jewish studies. You had figures to admire. And I'm talking about figures, and let's put it in from the beginning. These are people that literally from the age of 6, 7, 8 spend 16, 18 hours a day learning. I'm not exaggerating, right? The famous rabbi who died like 2 years ago, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, he died in the age of 90 something. He literally did nothing in life, nothing but sit in his room and read. Many amazing things and knowledge come from it. He knows all the Torah and he knows not much more than that. People from around the world come and get advice from him in business and in health. And you ask yourself, why would somebody who sits in a room and learn Jewish studies all day and the Talmud knows everything? I don't have a good answer for that. But it's something that happens there. We're talking about people that are focused, laser focused in going into the roots of everything that you can imagine in Jewish knowledge. And these famous rabbis, became those scholars and they continued the tradition of learning. And you had a rabbi and you had a student and you had a rabbi and a student. And this tradition continued on and on. When you have people passing the torch of knowledge, from generation to generation. And it continues to the fact that, as we said, if the rabbis were the points, everybody looked at the rabbis, obviously, everybody wanted to become this rabbi. So who would define who would be the rabbi? All of us, okay? Look at us, for example. How many we have here? I don't know, 20 something? We are sitting here and we all want to be rabbis because that's the goal. Everybody, our parents told us, you should be the rabbi. And all of us are learning together. So who's going to be the rabbi? Why me and not Jim? Why Jim and not Ashton? What's the difference between all of us? Talent. We all sit together in the same class from the age of 6 till the age of 16. And then there's that point that people says to you, Shmuel, listen, you're a great guy. You know the basics, but this is not for you. Your memory is not so strong, okay? Maybe you tend to forget. Maybe you don't take it so seriously. Maybe you're not too sharp. There are some people that are more talented than you. So you should go and work. And Ashton and Jim, they might be the biggest rabbis around, and they will continue to learn. And then a couple of years later, when in their 30s, Jim will be asked to come to the office, and the main rabbi is going to tell them, Jim, listen, you're a great guy, and you're actually going to be a great rabbi, and you are a rabbi already, and you'll learn and you know so much. But I don't think this is for you. Maybe you should go and be a teacher. And he's going to leave this place of learning, the yeshiva, and he's going to allow somebody else to continue and grow to be the rabbi, the leader. And you had this arrangement that people would learn, they would occupy themselves in learning, and they will also invest time every day in learning and developing themselves. And if you're looking at me and like, how much learning can you do, right? I'm just going to show you my library, and don't tell my wife because it's a bit not so great right now. Okay, this is the corner where I learn. Okay, here I have maybe 1/10 of the books only about Judaism that I have in my room. I'm talking about houses of books, right? It doesn't stop. It's the ocean. It's deep as the ocean. You ask yourself, how can people learn all that? Yeah, they can. So you have people learning from the age of 9, 10 till the age of 18, maybe 20 something. And then, of course, they're not going to be the rabbi. So what do? They drop and they go and work. So you saw the fiddler on the roof. So you know, Tevya always talks about it, that he has a goal, right? His daughter needs to marry the rabbi's son, but he himself is not a learned person. He goes to work. On the Sabbath, he sits a bit. He gives those quotes from like verses that you never heard of in the Bible. But in his mind, that's what he cares about. And how do we know that's what he cares about? Because when he sings the famous song, If I Was a Rich Man, what does he say? If I was a rich man, I had all the money in the world, then I would spend time learning some more. You hear? If you're a rabbi, somebody's gonna, provide your salary to continue to work. But if you're a normal person, you need to work, you need to fund yourself. And if you're gonna be rich for some reason, then your life goal is gonna be, you can go and sit and learn without being a rabbi, without being paid. That's gonna be your success in life. And this tradition continues all throughout the 20th century, the 19th century, the 18th century, until what really breaks all of Jewish history, the Holocaust. And the Holocaust comes in a point where there's those places for students to learn, a yeshiva, all over Europe. And I'm talking about tens of thousands of students all around Europe that study the Torah, the Talmud, day and night. And you had a tradition and a community of people that spend their lifetime learning until the point they cannot learn anymore because they need to fund themselves. But there was another system. If you don't need to fund yourself and you're not going to be a rabbi, there is one way that you're going to be able to continue to learn. I'm giving you the whole scope because I'm going to go into what happens in Israel today and why it's so different. It's an open question. What is one other system you can continue to learn without being funded by working, without being the rabbi? Any thoughts? You need to provide to your family, you need to feed your kids, you need to feed yourself. And you're 25, you're 30, you have already 5, 6, 7 kids. How can you continue to learn? Kim, you're hesitant. What?
Being a soldier or being in government?
But then you're going to stop learning and you want to continue to learn.
Oh,
You want to learn without being a rabbi, and you don't have the funding from the community, and you don't have a work. So what do? No?
You become
Anybody?
a teacher? You become a teacher?
But then you stop learning and you want to continue to learn. I mean, all day. I'm not talking about a couple of hours a day. You want to be a student, an avrech, we call it in Hebrew, to learn day and night. How can you fund yourself?
Join a yeshiva.
What?
Join one of the yeshivas where they sit and talk all day.
They sit and talk all day, but who funds them? They get a small amount of money from donation. It's not enough to feed your children and your wife. You don't know? Simple, my friends. You're marrying a wealthy family.
Like Akiva did, like Rabbi Akiva.
Exactly. Although in the story, it was cut out of the inheritance of his father-in-law, right?
Yeah, but the wife continued to support him.
But the situation is this, as we said before, Tevye wants his daughter to marry the son of the rabbi. You know how we can continue to be the son of the rabbi? Because he's going to fund it. The father doesn't work. The father worked, and he has a daughter, and the daughter is going to be married to somebody who's learning all day. He's going to fund the system, and they're going to actually be fed by the family of the wife. So I would tell you this, right? And all of the researchers that talk about Jewish success during history, one of the greatest finds was this. Open your ears. If the goal was to marry the son of the rabbi, so the son of the rabbi would marry the daughter of the richest person in town that can fund this party. You know what would happen? You had brilliant people and people with access to money. Together, you have great genes and great continuation of the tradition. Aha! Now, I talked about the Holocaust because this party is going to finish soon. When the war starts, the Nazis kill all the guys, all the students in all those places, with all the other Jews around them, they all die. They all been murdered. Now look at what happens in the mind of the Jewish survivors. You continue into the war, you finish the war, you're a survivor, you arrive to Israel, the small numbers, the 60,000, whatever, and you survive the Holocaust, and you know for a fact that the Jewish tradition and wisdom and Torah finished. People tell stories, they got together and they really believed nobody else in the world will ever have the Jewish knowledge. The biggest rabbis died. The biggest scholars. They were all erased in the war. And with that, we're establishing the state of Israel. And look what happened. In 1948, the small amount of people that survived the Holocaust and were still religious are gathering together in front of Prime Minister Ben-Gurion. And when they talk about going to the army, drafting to the army, these people say, stop. Wait. We just survived the Holocaust. We have a couple of thousand people here that are capable to fight. We're asking you a favor. And this favor is going to be forevermore part of the history. Ben-Gurion, listen to us. The Jewish tradition obligates us to continue and learn Torah. And we just finished the line of being a scholar because there are no more Jewish people learning allow us to have 400 people being elected, like the tribe of Levi, who did not work in Egypt, who weren't part of the land. Allow them to sit and learn. Build a new system of people to develop the Torah, because without it, what's the purpose of our nation? If we don't learn, if we're not part of the Jewish wisdom and the Jewish philosophy and learning. So Ben Gurion, who was a secular person, looked at them and says, "You're right. I have an obligation in the name of the Jewish people and the Jewish nation to allow you not to go to the army and go to learn. That's your obligation. Not only it's an obligation, I'm also going to fund this. How much you need? 200 shekels, 300, 400, 500 shekels. I bring 500 shekels. You go and fundraise in the US or whatever you want, and we'll work it out a system so you can get something that's going to motivate you to continue to learn." Now, this is the problem. You understand? What started with 400 people in 1950 today is every year 12,000 kids who graduate school and can go to the army, but the system already puts them in a place that they learn all day and all night. Because that's the claim of fame of the ultra-Orthodox community, the people who wear those black hats. They say, this is our part. You go to the army, you're saving Israel, protecting Israel. We are protecting the tradition of Israel. And if we're not going to do it, who's going to do it? The secular people of Tel Aviv. Who's going to do it? You came to Israel. You saw. Israel is not a religious place. Judea and Samaria is, and we're going to talk about Judea and Samaria in a second. But you go to Tel Aviv and you go to Netanya and all those places, people in Israel are not necessarily religious. And who's going to hold the Torah and the obligation to learn? Now, throughout the years, there were a lot of debates about it, a lot of pressure. People always ask, what about these ultra-Orthodox guys? When are they going to be part of the Israeli society? And it was always there as a tradition, as a fact, that they are out of the picture. And you know what? The vast majority of the times we said, okay, we had plenty of soldiers, and they're not built for an army. They're weak. They are not part of the society. They don't speak the same language. Many of them are learning Yiddish. They're not part of the cultural thing that's called Israel. But then the war of 7th of October started. And in the 7th of October, we were in a situation that we saw, actually this week, the 600 soldiers died. 600 soldiers died from the beginning of the war. And now this is a problem. Because suddenly we look around us and that's the feeling. We die, we sacrifice, we are part of the war, and they are there without arms. Nobody touches them. Nobody cares. Nobody's doing anything with that. And they avoid being part of the society. And that's the problem. So when we stand for the first time in history in front of this obstacle and we ask ourselves, really? You see your brothers fighting and you're not doing anything about it? Don't you care that your brothers and sisters' blood is shed on the streets? Wow. This is a good point. And now, throughout the society, people cannot justify anymore what's happening. We allowed you to learn. We understood the value in learning. We care for that. We honor that. But what about our blood? this nation is in a big problem right now. We cannot allow 12,000 people every year to be outside of the circle of serving. It means, friends, there are like 30,000 guys right now in the age of 18 to 22, 23. They're fine. They're not fighting. They're not part of this war. What is the ultra-Orthodox answer to that? We need to learn. Problem. And now I will share with you my perspective, because I talked about Judea and Samaria, and this is where I want to connect you to our story. And that's the problem. Because while they're talking about learning, we also care about learning. Okay, I wear this kippah and not a black kippah. I care about learning. I don't brag, but it's on my bio. I learned a year and a half before the army, and I learned 7 years after the army, and I served 3 years. You can learn before, you can learn after, but do your part. And I'm telling you this with pain, because 3 weeks ago, I went to a funeral of a friend of mine, 43 years old, 7 children, learned with me in the yeshiva after the army, and all the people next to me, where all of them are commanders and soldiers in the army, and they learn Torah, and they pray to God, and they're religious people. Not good enough? Can you find a system that's going to allow you to also serve your nation and also serve God? Very, very hard situation. And it came already, it was boiling down for many years, but now it explodes because we, the religious Zionists, the settlers, the people that were a lot of the times, going and supporting and saying it's important to learn. We support them, we care for them. We are already in a point that we look at the situation and we say, maybe we need to reconsider. Maybe we allow them too much. Now, how can you make somebody who never thought of going to the army being drafted? I don't have any solutions. I can tell you though, right now, in a very, very bad situation, and the culture thing is not good enough. We are in a place of finding solutions. And listen to one solution that was brought up this week. And again, CFOIC, Christian Friends of Israeli Communities, Judea and Samaria, you will love this. One of the biggest obstacles, and I see like the time is like already running, but I think it's so important, is that the biggest problem that the ultra-Orthodox community has to get drafted is the culture. They're claiming, and they're right, that going to the army is a very, secular place. And there's a lot of obstacles for them. The food is not kosher enough. It's mixed boys and girls. It's against their culture. So now there was somebody who suggested a very interesting perspective. Let's open a special unit, only ultra-Orthodox guys, and their job will be protecting the communities of Judea and Samaria. Why? Because then they're going to be isolated from the main army. They're going to protect people in a religious area. So you can be a soldier that live in an atmosphere that's more comfortable for you, right? Because our communities are all religious people, modest ladies. It's not like everywhere. That's a good idea, right? So it's only one example to show you that we need to think outside of the box, but this is an obstacle we need to solve. And without it, we're going to be in a very difficult and challenging place. So all of this, the war and serving, comes into the fact that right now, it goes back into memories of the 6th of October. There are demonstrations on the streets. We forgot about it. After the 7th of October, I said many times, this sense of unity. But right now there's demonstrations, right? Because they say, let's, draft the ultra-Orthodox. And the families of the hostages say, Bibi needs to go. And people are fighting again. And it's like, it's all over again. It's all over again. Like nothing changed. But I think something already still changed. And people, they cannot stand this fighting anymore. less and less people are going to demonstrate, less people are getting into fights because, look, we have a real enemy. When you have a real enemy, you tend to forget about the enemies that are so-called from the inside. So with that, I want to jump into the outer circle and of course talk about the US veto. So there's a resolution that talks about separating and calling for ceasefire without necessarily allowing our hostages to go home. And of course, we look at this and we say how sad, because look at what a mistake from the US government in my perspective. And I'm sharing with you, and I would love to have other opinions, although I assume all of you get it in the same way. I will say this very simple. A week before this resolution, America itself wanted to pass a resolution that's going to be connecting the two spots, ceasefire and hostages released. And there was a veto by Russia and China. They vetoed the fact to connect between these two elements. And of course, not disconnecting those elements, ceasefire and hostages, is without a doubt, it's Hamas winning. In every negotiation from that moment on, they understood that claiming and talking about ceasefire can't be without resourcing into the hostages situation. And an hostage situation for us is like one of the biggest goals. We are calling for total victory, but with that total victory, there's also an obligation to bring our kids back home. And I was amazed and shocked and could not realize the fact that a day after this resolution, there was an ISIS attack in Russia. You saw this devastating attack. What would people think in Russia at that day? Like, it's ISIS. They're calling ISIS there in the videos. You saw the horrific videos. What are they thinking? They can't see the bigger picture? Can they see this is like West society against Islamic regime? Can't they see what it means to partner up with China and eventually with Iran? I don't get it. And what you see right now, and I think that's where the US got it wrong. With all the pressure and all the pressure that Biden had in the beginning, talking about a resolution and hostages and Israel and support and all the things that stopped all the attacks and bigger situations in the area. I'm talking about, of course, Lebanon and war. There were still like small from Yemen. There was from Iraq yesterday. There were small things. But you saw that the US found itself folding once again into the ends of the circle of evil. Iran, China, Russia, maybe, that talks about how can we stand against America that says in one hand, we are with Israel, we're supporting Israel, we are against, and then in one hand it folds and says, you know what, just let's end this. And it's not only from them. The feeling that you get is that America is showing these weaknesses. And I would say this, at that day when they did not veto this decision, that day was a time that Prime Minister Netanyahu had to send a delegation to the US. You know what was the delegation about? The delegation was about finding ways how to fight in Rafah and make it secure and make it more, I would say, safe. That's a big debate in Israel. Rafah is going to be a very difficult fight. We need to say that. It's a condensed city. A lot of people are there in Gaza, moved to Rafah, and right now the Hamas stops them from moving to the northern area. That's going to be a big headache, right? But that's exactly was the day that the delegation was supposed to come. What would happen if the US would veto this decision once again? What was the price America had to pay? And what's the result of not paying it? And I think right now, the feeling, the atmosphere that Hamas got, Iran got, course, Russia and China, is America at this situation folded too fast, and I don't know what's going to be the resolution from that. And yet again, Israel needs to fight and continue to fight regardless of what the US say, and the truth is, regardless of what the world say. And yesterday, was it yesterday? In an embassy in Syria, somebody, we don't know who, shot a missile into the embassy and killed major commanders of the Iranian regime. I'm talking about major commanders from the Al-Quds power forces, people that are really, really high ranked in Iran. Some people say it's Israel. I'm not sure about it. I don't know, maybe. But I would say this. The obligation Israel has to its people this is something that when you don't live in Israel, you seem to forget. And that's what I want to finish with. We still are in a situation that more than 250,000 people don't live at their homes. I won't stop saying it. 250,000 people had to evacuate the northern border and the southern border. They cannot live at their home because they're being attacked with missiles every day and every night. They are evacuated and they live in hotels around Israel. Right now, many of them already talk about, it's already Passover. We need to send our kids to schools in new areas. They will abandon the north and the south of Israel. They are not there for 6 months already. And when we cannot secure them returning to their home and us feeling comfortable enough to say they can go back to their home, this war cannot be over. With all the stress, with all the problem, with friends being drafted for the third time. The third time means they went for 2.5 months, they were released to 3 weeks, they went for another month, they were released for 2 weeks, and now they're back again. People, families, still ongoing fighting, and the understanding we won't see the end of it very soon, because what happens in the south cannot happen in the north. And until we're not going to clean the area in the south with Rafah, with the Hamas, with bringing the hostages, and the Hezbollah in the north, not going farther to Iran, we cannot bring the families back to their homes. We won't bring our hostages back home. We cannot stop this war. This war wasn't starting by us. Remember this. On the 7th of October, we did not start anything. But we cannot live in quiet after being slaughtered, because we literally left our homes and we need to go back to our homes. And with that, I would say this last segment that says, we are now on the days between Purim and Passover. And I think I wrote about it in this letter last week. In the days of Passover and the days of Pesach, what is the difference in the redemption? Purim, they wanted to kill us and we survived. Iran, right? The Persians. And Passover, it was the Egyptians and we survived. What was the difference? I think that there's many differences, but the one obvious one was this. In Purim, it was a behind the scenes redemption. We didn't know what exactly happened. There were negotiations in the castle. God wasn't really there, or was he? Behind the scenes, Esther, Haman, Hashverosh, and eventually a miracle happened. Not something that you can see and claim this is a miracle, but it happened and we were redeemed. That was behind the scenes. And we pray for behind the scenes movement. But as Purim passed, and there wasn't any big behind the scene movement that saved us from the situation right now, now we need to go to Passover. And Passover is not behind the scene. It's in front of our face. It's big, huge miracles that changes everything. It's plagues from the sky. It's ocean splitting into two, and God's power being shown to the world. And I think if we prayed for Purim, for behind the scenes miracle, and we would take that, there was a negotiation, something would happen, it would be fixed. We would say, thank you, bring our hostages back, let's go home, and we will be fine. When it didn't happen, the next move is to pray for redemption in Passover style, which means big miracle in front of our eyes to the whole world to come and see. Look at this nation. God did not abandon them and did not forsake them. Thank you. And now I'm opening for questions. If you have a question, unmute yourself and ask a question. We're open. Any subject, any question, anything.
Rabbi, I have a question. Centuries of studying in the yeshiva produced many scholars in our history. You know, Maimonides and, all the Rabbi Cook and all of them. In the present day, modern day, yeshiva studying of the many thousands, is there any great minds coming out of this?
Yes, absolutely. But remember this, like any field in the world, the great physicians of the past defined things that nobody would ever overcome. The scientists, okay, from Newton to Galilei to, think about the greatest Einsteins of the world, the Newtons. We don't know the name of the people that today are changing the world with their science expedition, because the biggest names of history and the bigger marks of history, it's part of our tradition. And we are counting and continue to learn what Maimonides says, what Rav Kook says, just to name two the names that you mentioned. But right now, in the field of Torah scholars, I can think of like 10 or 20 names of people that are mind-blowing in their experience, in their learning, in their renewed thought. And if you want, I'll share with you, with all of you, just a couple of names that should resonate and should maybe be familiar if you want to go and dive deep into different aspects. So the one person, I know all of you know him, most of you, and if you don't, we said Fiddler on the Roof, well, Fiddler on the Roof, and then all of you Google Rabbi David Foreman. Who heard of Rabbi David Foreman? Thumbs up. Yeah. Rabbi Foreman, American rabbi. Kim, you don't know him? You must. Rabbi David Foreman, American rabbi, learned in Baltimore in a big yeshiva called Ner Yisrael. His teachings are mind-blowing. When I say mind-blowing, I mean that I've learned many years, thank God. What he writes, nobody writes before him. These are brilliant perspectives of intertextual meaning. And if you ever heard of Rabbi Foreman, he also has a website called Aleph Beta that has like those videos that presents his lessons. Mind-blowing, okay? So Rabbi David Foreman is one example of somebody who took it to the next level. I can think of more, but most of them are in Hebrew, and you won't have an ability to learn them. But one person who just died a couple of years ago, and you should also know, and you should also go to Amazon and buy all his books, all of them. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, right? Thumbs up if you heard of Rabbi Sacks. Yeah. I see Barbara knows, Lynn, yeah. Listen, you read his stuff, and I always say you need to be inside like under a roof, because your head is gonna explode. It's crazy what he says, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing, and the ability today we have We have so many layers of understanding that are actually based on people gathered so much knowledge from all the years and all the scholars. But I want to show you something because we are like a family here. I'll show you something. I have a photo here with my favorite rabbis. You want to see them? Just a second. Okay. Never before I exposed this. It's a weird thing, I must say, but we have a tendency also to put photos of rabbis. Are you ready? Now, listen, it's artistic, it's not normal, and it's like an NB world photo. Ta-da! Okay, let's
Schneerson?
see.
No,
There you go. So yeah. This is the Chabad, the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Schneerson.
Schneerson, Menachem Mendel, lived in New York. He's the leader of the Chabad movement. Absolutely.
Mhm,
You mentioned Rabbi Cook,
mhm.
Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, an important scholar that defines the religious Zionist movement. I recommend everybody to search his things because it's defining who we are, what do we do here. Rav Cook died in 1935. He died in 1994. Rabbi, maybe you remember him because his son is now the chief rabbi of the Sephardic movement in Israel. His name Rav Ovadia Yosef. This guy is a genius. Example. The story about him is as follow. You take a book that you learned, okay? A book, any book, and you take a pin and you pin it like this inside the book. He will tell you every word in every page under the pin. He has photographic memory. He knew everything by heart. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef is a legend. He is a legend. Now, it's a bit off. Like nobody knows him. And I think he's one of the greatest scholars. And I think what he writes is amazing. His name is Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch. Okay? Samson Raphael Hirsch, a German rabbi, died like 200 years ago. I still call him my rabbi, although I never saw him die 200 years ago. But the way he teaches and the commentary on the Torah, on the Tanakh, amazing. He really blows my mind with his understanding, and I recommend people to buy his teaching. Rav Hirsch, famous rabbi. So these are four of them. I have more, but this is just an artistic perspective.
Thank you for answering my question, because I think what we inherited from those rabbis past 1,000 years, we need to keep alive so that the next generation can have that.
And that's what we do. That's what we do. We spend days and nights connecting with our tradition, and that's something that's very important for us. By the way, okay, an
Thank
example.
you.
I took this book, right? Why is this book next to me? Because just before I started this Zoom, I sat with my daughter. Here's an example. She is in the third grade, and today she passed a quiz from all of her school. There were 10 kids, the best students in a quiz about the Passover's laws. That's something we dedicate our time and effort. So we're learning together. So she's going to succeed in the next quiz. That's what we care about. We have a goal to pass this generation. We pray for that. V'shinantam lebanecha. Your kids should know it. Your kids need to be part of it. If you didn't pass it to the next generation, where will it go, right? So it's a very important focus and goal in Jewish education, in my life as well. Anything else?
I would like to thank you for a very good presentation and really appreciate it. I've learned a lot from historically. I've got a question for you. What I do not understand is the people that have hostages in there, families. If my daughter were there, I would do most anything to get her out. But I would consider her dead since it's there because it's more important for you to win the war, as you say. I don't understand these people.
So listen, first of all, you would never understand. And I pray that none of us will never understand them, because being in this situation is something that is numbing your mind. Considering what they're going through is your parents know the feeling, right? When your kids, you know, when your kids fight with his classmates, it breaks your heart, right? Think about what they're going through. It's insane. Now, bearing this in mind, I would say that I'm not going to quote myself. I'm going to quote other parents that have kids that are hostages, and they say like you. They say something very simple, very normal, very makes sense. Don't you understand that all of Israel and all the people want to release your kids and fight for them? But when you're going and you demonstrate and you go against the government, you know what happens? It raises the price. The Hamas understand, look, now with all the pressure, they're going to release more of our terrorists. They're going to do everything we're asking for. So in one hand, we care, we love, we hug those families that are suffering the worst. And yet, yes, we pray to tell them, we are with you. You need to understand, we are with you. Do not demonstrate and do not make a mess, because it's only hiring the price. That's it. And we want to make it simple. So if we could control all of it, we would say, be quiet, sit at home, and talk like the parents who say, in the name of the nation, I will not allow to have terrorists being released for my son, for my daughter, because there are more people that can die because of that. What do you think is going to happen? In Gilad Shalit, you remember the one soldier, we released 1,000 peeps, terrorists. And why? Because there was a movement that demonstrated that. And if I wasn't positive about the US 10 minutes ago, I would salute to the one thing that the US taught us in every movie that we ever saw. America does not negotiate with terrorists. And I think that's something that is rooted in the understanding that we are like a family. So the prime minister will sit in front of somebody that his daughter was kidnapped, and it would allow him to scream at him and pressure him and do everything possible. It's sad, but that's the reality. And we mentioned rabbis before, so I need to say this. It happened throughout the history that people were kidnapped. And the most famous one was one of the biggest rabbis. He was the rabbi of Rashi. You all heard of Rashi. 1,000 years ago almost. His name was I just had his name. No. Amaram Mirothenburg. Amaram from Rothenburg. And he was kidnapped. And he was set in jail. And they went to his students and told them, you want to release your rabbis? Why? We just talked about how your rabbi is important. And he gave a verdict. He says, you don't give them $1, because then every rabbi would be kidnapped. And he made a law, which means you don't release people more than what they worth, because you open that, it won't end. And I think you're to the point by saying that. Unfortunately, it's painful when you see them. You cannot say that. The only people who can say are the brave parents that have kids there and say that. And there's a group, there's many who say exactly what you just said. Maybe last questions. I think we need to finish in 5 minutes. Please. Great questions. Great.
Shmuel, I'm just going to throw in a couple of things so we end on a more happy note. I'm going to send everybody a link, probably, I guess we don't really have an email. I'll try to post it in the chat. But Sapir Cohen is a girl that was a hostage, and she was one of the hostages that was released. But her story will knock your socks off. Like, just an incredible story. Basically, just to sum it up, all summer long before October, she felt like she was dying. She felt like something was wrong. And so she kept going to the doctor and saying, "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?" And the doctor finally said, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, get it out of your head, lady. You know, you're crazy, but nothing's wrong with you. But she just had this impending doom sense. And she finally she saw something caught her eye. It was totally secular girl, not religious at all. But something caught her eye that if you wanted to get healed, that you would pray 3 times a day for 30 days. And so she said, well, what the heck? You know, I feel like I'm dying anyway. Like, I'm gonna try this. Like, let's give God a try. And so she did this. She prayed for 3 times a day for 30 days. And the last day was like October 6th was her 30th day that she ended. And the next morning, and then her boyfriend, his family was in one of the Gush Katsi, or the communities, the kibbutzes down on the Gaza border. And he didn't want to go. They always go and spend the holidays with his family. And he was just like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And she's like, no, we have to go. It's your mom. We have to go. So they went and woke up October 7th to the attack, got kidnapped. Her boyfriend, her mother-in-law, they're all still in captivity. But just her story of talking about going through captivity, and because she had prayed that prayer for 30 days, she had it completely memorized, and that was what got her through. And she had favor with the terrorists. It's an incredible testimony. So I'm gonna send that out to everybody because I think everybody should watch it. And I've got a link from a pastor in Oklahoma that preached a message on October 22nd about why Christians should stand with Israel. And it is the clearest, simplest, most compelling message I have ever heard. And I just want you guys to have that as a resource, that if somebody is saying, well, what about the Palestinians, or should we support Israel, or Israel, isn't right? He just basically breaks it down and says, look, Hamas is evil. Israel is on God's side. Support Israel. Support God's side. He just makes it very, very simple. And I think each and every one of us, as these last 6 months have gone by, and the upcoming months, and as things happen, like what happened today, we as Christians need to be prepared that we can have the resources to be able to talk to other people and say, hey, this is why we're supporting Israel, and you should be too, and this is why. So those are just a couple of resources I wanted to throw out there.
I've seen the YouTube video as well, and it's very good. And she was memorizing Psalm 23, so what we know as Psalm 23, and she said it gave other hostages encouragement, a particularly young girl of 16, that she had the peace that she did to be able to keep sharing.
You're on mute, Kim. Kim, you're still muted.
I'm trying to do too many things at the same time, Sarah. So I'm gonna go get that link and throw it up there.
Okay, so in the meanwhile, I would really continue and ask you all. I know as you do, you pray, you share the truth on social media with your friends, and just spreading the word out there. I really appreciate the support and you coming and showing up and being a friend and partnering with us. It means a lot to us. And just I would share that, just 2 weeks ago, we had a solidarity tour, right? Katie is not here. I didn't see her, but she led a solidarity tour with like people coming, and we went to Judea and Samaria. We went to around the Gaza Strip and the Jordan Valley, and all over the place. And I can tell you, and I said it to them many times, you see on the faces of the people, the Israelis, without saying a word, they see you, you look different. You look a tourist. And this time you come, this time, in the time of war, you come to Israel, they gave the people, you know, their eyes was like glowing, knowing that we're not alone and people care and show us solidarity and are out there for us. Wow. So, and I'm telling you that was amazing. That lift everybody. So hopefully, right? Maybe we need to talk about like and now it's solidarity is not good. It becomes very hot in Israel, but maybe we need to think about the day after the summer. It's very hot now. Maybe we'll talk about November, Kim, huh? Aim to something
Sure.
in November. A tour, some Judea and Samaria, solidarity. Who knows what's going to happen? Until then, we all know that we pray for everything that's going to be well and good and in time. And with that, thank you so much. I saw Kim share the link. Make sure to click before you leave. Continue to follow us in CFOIC. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Toda rabba.
Toda Rabba.
Lila
live in
Tov.
If you live in Taiwan, I'm there next week, right? We're going
Yeah.
to visit some friends in Taiwan. If you're living there, no?
I don't think we've got anybody from Taiwan.
We
The
will
time
have, we
nobody
will
from
have.
Australia even came.
Right, it's late. Thank you,
If
everybody.
you guys want those links, you just send me an email and I'll be happy to send them out to you as well.
Toda Rabba.
Pleasure.
Shalom.
Thank you. Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was very good.
Oh, good.
And-
Well, it's always
and-
good to see you guys.
And Kim, you're uploading this Zoom after, right? You're gonna have the recording online so people can watch and share and everything.
We
We
will.
went deep into the ultra-Orthodox community, right? It was like it was
We did.
different. It was different. I
different, but
think
that
it's
was
an
good.
important knowledge. It was important knowledge, and people really sometimes like, what's your story? What's
Right. Well, and you see the headlines, but you have no idea what the backstory or why or where it came from. So
I'm sending these posters on. No, I'm not. Okay, bye. Bye. We'll see you.
bye-bye.